I've made dozens of videos and written about why the evidence for disease-causing particles termed viruses is lacking. However, when I cover one particular area in a video, there are always questions like, okay, I get that, but what about this? I think if you've seen all the relevant videos, read Virus Mania, and my other articles, then most of these questions are covered. But it seems that's too much work for some, so I've taken the challenge to produce a one-stop video. It appears that a 3-hour film can be summarised in a few seconds. Let's see if we can do a similar job with virology. And make sure you watch to the end, as there's my own 5-second version of virology. What is a virus? The word virus derives from the Latin word virus, which simply means poison. So viruses are supposed to be bad guys. A virus is a tiny intracellular particle that infects and replicates inside a host cell to cause disease. Don't be fooled by anything less, otherwise we're not really talking about viruses. Like unicorns, many people talk about viruses, but no one has ever seen one in nature. There are sick people. There are times when people in one area get sick together. There are tiny particles everywhere. There are images of cells breaking down and vesicles. There are indirect techniques like the PCR and genomic sequencing. None of these things require the existence of viruses. Let's find out why. Viruses are part of the human imagination. This is Russian botanist Dmitry Ivanovsky. History books say that he discovered viruses in 1892. He performed experiments with supposed infected sap to show that tobacco mosaic disease could be transferred between plants. He used very fine filters that stopped bacteria and fungi, and due to germ theory mania, concluded that an even smaller microorganism must be responsible. Tobacco mosaic virus is one of the foundational claims that viruses exist. There's just a few problems. Grinding up lots of sick plants and putting the concentrated juice on another plant after damaging its leaves to make it sick doesn't prove you have a virus. For a start, there is no valid control experiment and the process does not replicate anything that happens in nature. But what about the pictures they say shows the tobacco mosaic virus? And that it is possible to actually purify these particles. It might be claimed that this is a virus, but by itself it hasn't been shown to infect healthy plants. There may be a correlation with its appearance in sick plants, and it may have a function, but it has not been shown to be the monocausal agent of disease. Tobacco mosaic disease is not a viral infection. It's what happens when plants are inbred, malnourished, grown in unsuitable conditions, artificially damaged or attacked by insects.
It's a train, baby.
What's making me sick then? This is a sick person. His doctor doesn't know what is wrong with him, so says it is a viral illness. The doctor was told by another doctor that people who are sick in this way have a viral illness. No viruses have ever been found in a person who is sick in this way, but appointment times are short and people need to be paid. This is people getting sick together simultaneously. Due to indoctrination and groupthink, many people believe that the only way this can happen is if a virus is passing between them. Many people got sick together in Chernobyl in 1986, and no, it wasn't a radioactive virus. There are many common factors that people in one place can share, such as the same water and food sources, the same air quality, similar sun exposure and vitamin D levels, shared psychological stressors, changes in atmospheric conditions, and forces that we don't understand. However, talking about such things could get you investigated by the authorities or your research funding cut. Some people seem to think that this is conclusive evidence that viruses do indeed exist.
Ooh, that's a bingo!
You fool! Don't you know they can grow viruses? When you've spent decades looking for viruses in people but can't find any, it's not a good look. Virologists needed to come up with something to show the audience. The electron microscope came into play in the 1930s, but direct visualization of any virus from a human was elusive. Then in 1954, renowned magicians John Enders and Peebles suggested that they had grown the measles virus in their lab. Let's have a look at their magic show by pulling back the curtains. First, they tried to produce alleged viruses from human lung cells, but nothing happened. Human intestinal cells, nothing. Human uterus cells, nothing. Human skin cells, nothing. Human muscle cells, nothing. Monkey nut cells, nothing. Human foreskin cells, nothing. Embryonic chicken cells, nothing. Things were not looking good, but then at last there was some action in the test tube with human kidney cells and rhesus monkey kidney cells. Now, measles is supposed to affect the respiratory tract in humans, but they had to jump organs and then species to produce the now famous cytopathic effect. So how did the trick work? The patient samples were either blood or throat swabs immersed in cow's milk, then poisoned with penicillin and streptomycin. To the mix was added bovine amniotic fluid, beef embryo extract, horse serum, unspecified antibiotics, probably more penicillin and streptomycin based on Enders' previous chemistry experiments, and phenol red. The safari soup was then passaged, which means removing some of the cells and putting them into a fresh culture mix. This is another way to stress the cells, and the more it is done, the more it diverts from anything resembling what happens in nature. If the cells don't break down the first time, simply passage and poison until you see the desired results. Amazingly, this multi-stage toxic assault on the cells made some of them sick and looked a bit odd under the microscope. To make these slides, they added formalin to the sample, then ethanol and ether, stained it with hematoxylin and eosin, and then washed it with 95% alcohol and oil, and topped it off with xylene.
That'll do, pig.
All perfectly natural, of course. And jackpot, said the virus hunters. This munted tissue is the work of a virus. It's a bit like detonating an atomic bomb and claiming that the subsequent crop failure appears to be due to pestilence. With a quick sleight of hand, the word isolation was inserted into Enders' paper, and because it wasn't being done according to the scientific method, there was no control experiment. Instead, Enders and Peebles broke the magician's code and nearly let the audience in on the trick with the following statement in the fine print. Cytopathic effects, which superficially resemble those resulting from infection by the measles agents, may possibly be induced by unknown factors. Subsequent virologists have concealed these details from the casual spectator and have been emulating the trick with more sophisticated sleights of hand. Using healthy cell lines that the invented virus is supposed to infect is for rookies. If you want lots of spectacular cell breakdown in test tubes, the experts now use reliable props, such as Vero cells. This is a monkey kidney cell line with abnormal numbers of chromosomes, found back in 1962. That's right, it's already defective before they help it become more defective and the cells start to pop off a few vesicles. Hey presto, take a snapshot of these babies and say that they are viruses. With no evidence at all, claim that the particles are infectious and kill the cell. Assemble some genetic sequences from the soup, then say that they are viral and came from inside the particle, with no step to prove this either. So that's how you culture a virus that doesn't exist. Add all sorts of biological soup to a cell line that is already abnormal and may come from the wrong species. Kidney cells are handy because antibiotics and other foreign matter are often toxic to them. If nothing happens, passage the mixture a few times to stress the cells to the max. Once the cells die as a result of the process itself, blame the virus boogeyman. Substitute the word isolation for something that means the opposite, so that biological supermix now means viral isolate. And ignore famous virologists when they suggest that they didn't properly isolate anything after all.
Well, what's the purpose of the purification then?
Well, to make sure you have a real virus, you know.
No need to ask, he's a smooth operator.
Messed up animal experiments. There's another part to the Enders measles virus invention trick, and that's when they tried to demonstrate that their biological soup was infectious and disease-causing. Now, the germaphobes claim that measles is one of the most infectious viruses and it passes easily through the airborne route. So to provide a realistic model of this, they injected their biological brew right into the brains of some unsuspecting mice. Happily, on that occasion, the animals remained well, but in many instances, animals are tortured senselessly, and the anti-science sometimes goes off the gauge. In Virus Mania, we describe many of the bizarre experiments the virologists have been carrying out over the past century. For example, with regards to polio, we explain that Landsteiner and Popper chose to take a diseased piece of spinal marrow from a lame 9-year-old boy, chopped it up, dissolved it in water, and injected 1 or 2 whole cups of it into the abdominal cavities of 2 test monkeys. One died, and the other became permanently paralyzed. Their studies were plagued by a mind-boggling range of basic problems. First, the glop they poured into the animals was not even infectious, since the paralysis didn't appear in the monkeys and guinea pigs given the alleged virus soup to drink, or in those that had it injected into their extremities. Shortly after, researchers Simon Flexner and Paul Lewis experimented with a comparable mixture, injecting it into monkeys' brains. Next, they brewed a new soup from the brains of these monkeys and put the mix into another monkey's head. This monkey did indeed become ill. As usual, it could hardly be said to be scientific because no control experiment was performed. Why did they resort to such Mickey Mouse experiments? Because contagion cannot be demonstrated in clinical experiments that involve alleged viruses, and this includes experiments with humans. The Spanish flu was supposedly caused by a highly contagious virus, except there is no evidence for this. In 1918, Dr. Milton Rosnow tried to infect 100 volunteers with the flu by spraying what he thought was the infectious agent into their nose, throats and eyes. This didn't do anything, so then volunteers spent time in influenza wards where they breathed in the fetid gas coming from very sick patients and were exposed to wet coughs right in their faces from multiple individuals. And not one got sick.
And?
No transmissions were made.
Every time these experiments have been attempted, they fail to show human-to-human transmission. I've followed the reference trails in my video, Secrets of Influenza, and it's a dead end. No confirmation of transmission can be found. Non-existent viruses, jumping species. Bird flu, swine flu, monkeypox, coronaviruses, and even HIV. Skip the part about proving that these particles even exist and are the cause of disease. When you don't even have evidence for the fundamentals, start to speculate about how they are apparently poised to attack us. In this crazy world, the virus hunters call for the slaughter of chickens, cows, or any animal suspected of harboring a virus.
There's people on the street get diseases from monkeys. Yeah, that's what I said, they get diseases from monkeys. Now there's junkies with monkey disease. Who's touching these monkeys? Please leave these poor sick monkeys alone. They got problems enough as it is.
That should about cover that nonsense. Find a virus first before involving animals in the story. The wheels fall off Koch's postulates. Wait, the fact checkers say that Koch's postulates don't apply to viruses. That's because the invention of the electron microscope revealed that the alleged viruses couldn't be seen in the person, no matter how sick they were. However, why don't they purify what are claimed to be viruses in the lab and see if the particles by themselves can infect a host and cause disease? In any case, Koch's postulates have been rebooted a few times with lowered requirements, such as in 1937 when Ribber's postulates were put forward. Whoops! They failed to satisfy those as well. Fredericks and Rellman lowered the bar again in 1996, calling for a reconsideration of Koch's postulate. Their postulates were so loose that even they admitted that the methodology meant the biological role or even existence of these inferred microorganisms remains unclear. Probably best to ignore any claims about viruses causing illness if it is based on postulates that, even when satisfied, don't require the existence of the proposed virus. The problem goes even deeper. No hypothetical virus is even going to satisfy Koch's postulates because Koch didn't satisfy his own postulates either. Germ theory failed in the 1800s, but many people didn't get the memo. Check out my video Koch's Postulates Germ School Dropout for a look into this revelation. The PCR can't prove viruses exist. Fredericks and Relman's paper could be considered a sign that virology was in trouble again at the end of the 20th century. Because nobody could find actual viruses by their true definition, they resorted to even more indirect measures, that is, by techniques that alleged to detect some part or consequence of the invisible particle. The polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, is a manufacturing process that massively amplifies selected genetic fragments. It's like a copying machine. However, when you take some snot from someone's nose and apply the PCR, it does not tell you the origins of the genetic material, whether a postulated germ even exists, or the relevance of its detection. In other words, it doesn't tell you that you are sick or infected.
Then there's just very few molecules that you don't have at least one single one of them in your body, okay? So that could be thought of as a misuse of it, just to claim that it's meaningful. PCR is separate from that. It's just a process that's used to make a whole lot of something out of something. That's what
Also,
it is. But it's not, it doesn't tell you that you're sick, and it doesn't tell you that the thing you ended up with really was going to hurt you or anything like that.
They'll try to tell you that a positive result at a certain number of PCR cycles means that you've got a disease.
Go on and fool me.
The same disease that some goats, jackfruit, motor oil and water can be afflicted with too, apparently. Keep in mind that the PCR has a habit of creating epidemics out of thin air, even when a bacterium is falsely blamed as the baddie, as was seen with the false whooping cough epidemic in 2006. Some people have worked out for themselves that if you're in peak physical condition and testing positive, something might be amiss with the PCR. The inventor of the technique, Kary Mullis, was right about the limitations of the PCR and its potential misinterpretations. However, today's hucksters continue to botch the application of the PCR regardless of whether you believe in viruses or not. Well, hopefully that was helpful, but please check out all of my other videos and articles, and of course Virus Mania, which provide additional perspectives. And now, as promised, if that was too long for you, then I've made an even shorter version, which goes like this.
Ice, ice, baby. Ice, ice, baby.
What they have in reality in their test tubes, right? They have nothing.
Alright, stop, collaborate and listen. I sit back with my brand new invention.